What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode of T-Ride Outdoors. Today we got episode number 8 of our Tackle Tuesday adventures. Today we're going to be talking all about jigs. So I brought my 2 jig boxes out of the boat, and this one is just jigs. Like, we have flipping jigs and casting jigs, and then over in this one is my finesse jigs or bitsy jigs, those smaller presentation jigs. So I already got a couple of them laid out on the table of the different kinds of jigs. So we got 6 to talk about. So without further ado, we'll just get started. We're not going to go in any particular order here. Just what I grabbed is what I'm going to be talking about first, and we'll go until we run out of baits to talk about. So first one up, this is going to be a flipping finesse style jig. Okay, forget the brand on this one, but it is a finesse style jig. And it's flipping because the head is pointed. So with that head being pointed, when you're flipping in the heavy cover, it's going to be more like, aerodynamic is the wrong term, but it's going to be more dynamic in the water. It'll go straight through the cover and it won't get snagged up on anything because of that pointed head. So I have a rattling chunk on the back of that, Jigs Squad rattling chunk. It's just a rattling crack and crawl, shrunk down to be a jig trailer. This color it's like a natural color. It's got green pumpkin, it's got orange, brown, and some purple flake in there. All right, so this one, like I said, it's a finesse flipping jig. I really should have a smaller trailer on it because it's a finesse jig. You want to shrink down that presentation whenever you're throwing finesse style baits, especially in jigs, because the purpose of this jig is to flip it into those finesse style spots right next to some logs where the fish are being finicky and you need a downsize. So throwing a big trailer on it kind of defeats the purpose of having a finesse jig in the first place. Basically with this trailer, you'd be better off just throwing it on the back of a regular flipping jig. This one is a 3/8 ounce finesse jig. But yeah, so that's the finesse jig, flipping jig. I guess since we're talking finesse, we'll go right into the finesse casting jig. And right here I have the Jigs Squad finesse casting jig. I was just using this one the other day in a local tournament. So there's a line connected to it from where I cut it off to retie at the end of the day. So a casting jig can also be a skipping jig. A lot of the casting jigs have a flat back on the back of their head so that when you're skipping it through the water, it's a flat surface for it to skip on. And I didn't think it'd make that much of a difference, but it actually helps a lot when you're trying to skip it under a tree or under a dock or anything like that. It makes a big difference having a jig with the flat style head on the back. It just makes it that much easier to skim across the top of the water rather than going straight into the water like a regular flipping jig does. So this is a casting or skipping jig. It's green pumpkin, it's got some baby blue in there. And then I also have a shrunk down crack and crawl on the back of this casting finesse jig. A little bit bigger. This one's actually 5/16. It just looks bigger than the other one. I think the other one's tungsten, this one's just lead. So that's why this head looks bigger than the other one. But yeah, it's a 5/16 ounce. So move on from that. Let's see. Since we're talking about finesse, I'll just go to the other one that I have, which isn't really a finesse style jig, but it's a bitsy jig. It's a smaller jig. It's 1/4 ounce. It's just a smaller presentation. I have I believe this is a Zoom crawl on the back of it. Yeah, Zoom crawl on the back of it. Big kickers on this, and it is a finesse style jig. It's a smaller presentation, being a 1/4 ounce. I've really been throwing a lot of the 1/4 ounce bitsy jigs in the river on Dam 4 of the Potomac. And the smallmouth seem to really like those smaller presentation baits like this, as opposed to a huge football headed jig like this. But we'll get into the football jig and what I like to use it for. So yeah, I mainly use these bitsy jigs to flip and pitch against the banks and down trees and stuff like that. When I see structure in the water, I'll throw this. But I will not throw it around too much rock because it gets stuck in the rock very easily. So when I come to a certain section of the river where I'm marking a lot of rock structures under the water on my live scope unit and my graphs, I'm gonna go ahead and pick up a football headed jig. And a football headed jig is called that simply because the head of the jig is shaped ovally like a football. So it makes it less inclined to go down in rocks and get stuck and won't come back out. It'll just sit right on top of the rocks. Again, this is just my personal opinion about it. There might be a different way to throw a football jig, but that's what works for me, is targeting those rock structures. And so that's what I'm gonna keep doing. So this one is one of my all-time favorite colors in any jig, which is a peanut butter and jelly. So it's like a brown on the back side and then like a purple jam color on the front side. And I have that paired with this is a Strike King chunk on the back of it. Big football headed jig. This is a 3/8 ounce. So next, let's go ahead and talk about not a finesse style jig. This is a 3/8 ounce casting or skipping jig, and it's a bigger presentation for sure. I also have a bandito bug on the back of it, which doesn't shrink down the presentation at all, but it actually entices those bigger fish to hit it. So I'm gonna be skipping this under docks or under down trees because it has that flat head. As a casting jig, it's a lot easier to skip one of these than it is a flipping jig with that pointed head. But this color is green pumpkin. It's got some brown in there. I don't know the exact color that Coogan Squad calls it. Let's see. They call it their juice casting jig. Yeah, they just call it green pumpkin. Nothing other really specific. So yeah, this is the green pumpkin. They call it the juice casting jig, also known as just a casting or skipping jig. But yeah, this one's 3/8. It's green pumpkin. Have a bandito bug on the back. This is actually the only jig that I pulled out that has a bandito bug, but a couple of the other ones that are in my big jig box do have a bandito bug on them, just for that bigger presentation. Like this one right here, this is another version of a skipping or casting jig. This one is all pearl white. I really like using this one for bed fishing in particular. Just the white just makes it really easy to see under the water where I fish. Just the white really pops through the greenish brown water on the Potomac, and you can really see it on the fish's bed. So that's why I like to use the white. But that's just another casting skipping jig out of the big jig box. And then I do have another one that has a bandito bug on it, and this one is a flipping jig that is an ounce. I rarely use this here in Maryland. I'm sure if I took a trip to Texas or Florida, I'd have no problem throwing this. But in my area, this is just gonna scare probably 75% of the fish away if I cast it in there on them. So I just don't throw it all that often. I've caught maybe 2 fish on it at a local pond that has some rocks, and I know that there's big fish in there. But I rarely throw this just because it's an ounce and it's a very big presentation. And again, having that bandito bug on there does not help in any means. And then the last style of jig that I have personally in my box is just a regular flipping jig. This is a Terminator Lures flipping jig. I don't have any other ones up there, but it's just a flipping jig. It has a pointed head, just so when you're penetrating through the brush and what you're flipping, that it doesn't get hung up on any limbs or anything like that. So it's very nice to have a jig like that can get through the stuff you're trying to flip to. But that's really all I have on jigs. I guess we'll go over a couple of rod specs. So whenever I'm throwing a jig, I have a dedicated jig rod in the boat. It's a 7'3" heavy, moderate fast taper for the tip. It's a, what is the rod that I use? It's Abu Garcia, is it a Revo? I think it's a Revo, Abu Garcia Revo, or no, it's the Zeta. It's the green one, the Zeta. But it's 7'3" heavy with a moderate fast taper on the tip, so it's very sensitive under the water, but it has plenty of backbone being a 7'3" heavy to get that fish out of the cover when you're setting the hook and throwing a jig like one of these. And then the reel that I throw with it, I actually just brought it in here to get it re-spooled. I throw it on a, this is a Shimano Corrado DC. This gear ratio is going to be 8:5 to 1 on this guy. This is the high gear ratio, and it's right-handed. All my bait casters are right-handed. When I throw bait casters, I reel with my right hand, and then when I throw spinning reels, I reel with my left hand. I don't know why, it just feels comfortable to me with the spinning rod to reel left, and then with the casting to reel right. But yeah, I gotta get this baby all lined up and put it back in the boat for Thursday's fishing adventure. But thank you guys for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed. Like I said, this week was all about jigs. Next week's gonna be all about swim jigs and the benefits. I used to not throw swim jigs as much as I do, but now I don't leave home without one tied on. They're that useful to me. So thank you guys for watching. Stay tuned for next week. Don't forget to hit that like button, hit that subscribe, and I'll catch you guys next week on another episode of Tackle Tuesday, brought to you by T-Rod Outdoors.